I see my work as, this may be over the top for some, I don't know, but I do see it as a matter of like life and death. Like, I feel like people are in such bondage to debt and to these ideas, these limiting beliefs around what it means to be wealthy and all this stuff. And I feel like, if not you, then who? Like, who's supposed to set the people free? Yeah, there's tons of people out there that talk about money, but until you talk about it the way that I do, I don't care. You don't matter to me.
Thank you for taking the time to tune into the Why Influence podcast, where we interview influencers about their why and motivation for sharing online. I'm your host, Jeremy Siegel, and today our guest is Patrice Washington. Patrice is a very successful podcaster with a podcast called Redefining Wealth. She talks about how it's important to chase purpose and not money. She has over 900 iTunes reviews. In comparison, I have 30 iTunes reviews. Now, Patrice made it clear that podcasting is her main platform, but she has a pretty solid social following on other platforms. She's got about 70,000 Instagram followers, 30,000 YouTube subscribers, 20,000 followers on Facebook, 15,000 followers on Twitter. So she's got a solid base in regards to followership across different social platforms, but podcasting is by far her main platform. In this episode, we're going to be finding out why it's so important to Patrice to spread this message of redefining wealth. Without wasting more time, let's jump into the interview.
Welcome to the Why Influence podcast, where we deep dive into the why behind some of the world's most influential people. Why do you influence? Why are you an influencer? We hope to inspire you to share your voice with the world. And now, your host, Jeremy Siegel.
All right, Patrice, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time today to come on here and share your why.
I'm always excited to share my why. So happy to be here.
Well, just as a reminder, I discovered you because of Podcast Movement. I saw you give your keynote there, and then we talked a little bit after your talk and just talked a little bit about your why. And then I explained about my podcast, and then you offered to come on it. So here we are.
Here we are.
And as I dug deeper into your brand, I found videos and podcasts where you actually broke down your why and intentionally looked at it at a deep level. And I think that's something that a lot of influencers don't do, and it's something that they should do, or people should do before they even start, just so they know their real purpose.
Yeah, I agree with you on doing it before you start, or you waste a lot of time, effort, energy, money.
Right. Yeah. So I'm excited to dig into this with you because I think you have a lot of value to share. So really briefly, can you explain your platforms and maybe 2 to 3 sentences and talk a little bit about what you do?
I mean, essentially, I was known for like a decade, almost 10 years as America's Money Maven, but my real why at this stage in life was really just to share with people that wealth was so much more than money and material possessions, because I found that people always wanted to fix their financial problems with like things outside of themselves. And so I wanted to create a platform that reminded them that wealth is more than money and material possessions. It's about well-being. And so everything that I do now just ties into helping people see the bigger picture for how their behavior, their relationships, their rituals, how it all impacts their finances, so that when they get the money they say they desire, they can actually keep it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that you get a lot more fulfillment out of life living that way as well, which is really important.
Yes.
So you've got quite a reach now on quite a different platforms. Before we jump into the typical conversation of your why, I'd like to just ask, is there a moment where someone reached out to you and just touched your heart with the impact that you've had on them, whether it's something you said or just like one person just to kick us off?
You know what? I get so much every day now, right? Now that the reach is greater, but the person who I call my angel that I will never forget is the man who reached out to me when I first started blogging in 2009. And I had just come out of this season where I had absolutely nothing. I had lost everything. And I got the bright idea to start a blog. I'll say it was a spirit-led idea to start this blog and help people with finances anyway, even though mine were in a shambles. And I started the blog, did it for a few months, realized that no one was really paying attention, at least people that I thought, because I didn't know much about blogging. But I was like, if my mom and my husband aren't reading, then I have no audience, right? I'm an audience of one myself. And I stopped for a couple months. or it felt like a couple months, maybe it was a few weeks, but there was a man that reached out to me via email, and he said, "Hey, I hope everything is okay. I haven't seen you posting, but I've really been enjoying your blog." And he went on to list a few things that it was doing for him. And so because that was 2009, there were no influencers, it wasn't all this stuff, I was blown away that this stranger could see value in what I was putting out there when some of the people who were right around me thought it was like something cute to do. This man actually saw value enough to seek me out and say, "Hey, don't stop," essentially. And I always say he's my angel. I think that's why I'm still here doing what I do now for people like him.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's good to get that spark early on to give you that momentum. So you started blogging in 2009. Have you been essentially a full-time influencer since then, or what did you do before you made that jump to becoming an influencer?
So I didn't know the term influencer, honestly, until recently. Like maybe the last 2 years or so, I would consider myself an influencer. Yeah. I came from a brick and mortar background. I owned a real estate and mortgage brokerage for several years before the recession hit. And so when that took me out and basically took me to my knees, that was kind of where I discovered like what my greater purpose was, because I always used educating people as a tool to market the business. I never saw the education piece as a business. It was just marketing. Right. And so when everything hit the fan and it was time to kind of reinvent myself, in 2009, when I started that blog, that was my first awareness that like, oh, you can educate people and perhaps you can monetize that. But I still didn't understand really how. But pretty much since that time, it's what I've done full time. I've just continued to invest in educating myself on how to keep finding my way, finding the platforms that felt good for my voice. Because, you know, everything is not for everyone. Right. So I tried YouTube videos, you know, I ended up writing books. I ended up on radio. I ended up doing all these things. But as an influencer, the thing that has made me feel like I've created the greatest influence, honestly, even though I've written books and done television and all that, has been my podcast.
Okay. And when did you start that?
September 2017.
Okay.
I started the podcast reluctantly. It was the podcast that wasn't supposed to be.
So why is it reluctantly?
Well, because I was already doing a lot. I had a weekly radio segment on a nationally syndicated show. I was traveling a lot, doing speaking. I was starting to work on my book, and there was just so many things going on. I'm a wife, I'm a mom. I was trying to be basketball coach, not really, assistant basketball coach, that annoying parent on the side who ends up volunteering to help. Like there was just so many different things going on. And when it was presented to me as an opportunity, I was like, ooh, that sounds like work. The weekly segment, which is only 4 to 5 minutes, was already so much to like produce. When I was like, someone thinks I should do a 30, 45-minute, possibly hour-long thing every single week. Oh, no, I'm just not set up for that. And the person who was talking to me was actually from the radio network that owned the show I was on. And they're like, but we can monetize your segment further and you can really make money from what you're putting out there anyway. So I was like, really? Okay, so maybe I should consider it. I thought I had until January. I'm thinking like, oh, okay, this is like a New Year thing. I'll have 3-4 months to get my head around it. And they're like, well, if we're going to include you, you have to be ready for sweeps, which is in September. Well, it was August.
Oh, wow.
And I knew nothing about podcasting. I hadn't researched podcasting. I knew nothing. And that's why it was the reluctant thing, because I ended up reaching out to someone, Vern Ross, who was a podcast coach. He helped people get started. And I'm like, dude, how long does it take to put something like this together? How long do you usually give clients? He's like, 3 months is good, 3 or 4 months. And I'm like, oh, I have 3 weeks. And yeah, the next week podcast movement was coming to California, and literally I felt like it was divine timing. I cleared a few days, went to podcast movement, met everyone that I could who ended up supporting me, was starting the podcast. And it's been 2 years and a little change now. And it was the best thing that I could have done. This has had far more impact than I even knew could be possible.
So what was the biggest driving factor to you just starting the podcast then? Because you had all these things going on and you're working on all these other pieces and you had life that's also in the way. The place that you were creating content for asked you to create a podcast, but what was like the real reason to you for why you started it? Like what made you say, okay, this is what I'm doing this?
time, I don't think I was fully conscious of what could be possible, right? Like it sounded like, okay, I've been on this show for 3.5 years at that point, and they've told me over and over again, they're going to figure out how to monetize it. They never really did. And it was such a commitment. And so finally it seemed like, oh, wow, maybe this is what I've been working up to. I should just be obedient and not try to fight it. Maybe this is the thing that they'll actually be able to take and like finally monetize my efforts, because it's been so much work. And so that was what I was thinking at first. And it was going to podcast movement and listening to other people that kind of started to make me think, no, maybe this is greater. And then I start looking at my audience from the YouTube videos or just women who would come up to me when I was speaking. And I was like, wow, I'm talking about different things like the fit pillar, for example, where I'm always talking about taking care of yourself and working out. I'm like, wow, this is such a better way for them to consume my thoughts without having to stop and watch something and without having to be in the car listening to the radio for when I come on or something like this. Like this on-demand type of opportunity really might be the way that I could really become more of a thought leader in my space and really go deeper and share what I cannot get out on a 4 to 5 minute radio segment, and without being policed by producers.
Right.
Because I also come from that media world where it's like soundbite, say what they want, versus the podcast was like, no, say what's truly on your heart. I think that's what created the greater connection between the audience and I, because they know it's genuine. It's not a soundbite for terrestrial radio. It's like, wow, this lady's on here every week, kind of pouring her heart out. And I think that's why that platform ended up being better than anything I could have imagined. Plus, I don't have to get dressed up to do it. That's also been a really great motivator. It's like,
Nice.
You don't need all the stuff. Just bring yourself.
Yeah. I work from home too. I know that feeling.
Yeah.
So what was it like in the early days when you first started your podcast? Because you came in with a potential audience from this radio show. You had some YouTube. You had speaking events that you were doing. What was it like in the early days of your podcast and bringing the audience over to that?
It was a little challenging just because I was also, so my concept of redefining wealth was also really new. I had just launched it in like July.
Okay.
So that was still really new, and people were still wrapping their head around why I was talking about all these things that were not budgets and credit reports. And so I would still get messages like, hey, but what about the budgeting apps, right? And I'm like, no, I'm trying to get you to think bigger than just the budget app. Like, you got to follow me. So I was still in that place of doubting and questioning, will they get it? Like, do they get it? Do they understand why what I'm trying to do is so much more important than just the same old conversation about money? And I struggled internally. So people may not be able to tell on the outside because I'm a good marketer. I can make things look pretty, but internally I was still kind of like, oh my gosh, is this like suicide? What are you doing? Get back in your box. This is not what you get paid for. The people who invite you to TV or speaking opportunities, you've kind of defined this very neatly packaged money box that you're supposed to stay in, and all this heartfelt conversation about your childhood trauma and your relationship woes or your faith, which I never was really comfortable talking about when I was doing the other stuff. And I was opening up so much of all of me, not like this compartmentalized version, that it was a little scary. It was a little scary to be that vulnerable and literally just not know who could listen, like who could find it, who could pick it up and what they could think about it. And I had to get through some of that. But what happened early on was that, like that man, there would be a couple people. Initially, it was a couple people. It wasn't like droves of people, right? It was like a couple people who were like, oh my gosh, you told that story about growing up feeling really ugly and unworthy and all this stuff. And I would have never known that about you. And you just, like, I connect with you on such a deeper level now. And I was like, oh, wow. So it started to be those little moments where People be like, oh my gosh, you talked about your husband and this and that, or like, thank you for speaking up on your faith. Like, I haven't heard anyone be so bold who's also like a finance person talking about faith in this way. And so those comments started to give me the courage juice, as I say. It started to be like, you know what, if I help one person, right. And that was truly it. Like an audience of one is still an audience. I started to say to myself, like, if I help one person today, like, dude, I did my job. And I feel like I kept getting those winks, like every day. There was just one or two people who were like, man, this touched me. Thank you so much for this. This was a blessing. And so over the last 2 years, that's multiplied tremendously. But those first few, maybe like 6 to 8 weeks where I was like, what are you doing? What have you done? Yeah, there was a little trepidation there.
So vulnerability is like a big piece of what's important for sharing and being authentic and being yourself. So what were some of the stepping stones that you took to overcome that vulnerability? Obviously, after you were doing it, you're getting the positive feedback from the people saying like, this touched me, or this was important, or now I know this about you. But like before you shared it, or as you're sharing it in those first couple of weeks, like from first being more vulnerable to like being a little bit more comfortable with it, what was that journey like, and what kind of stepping stones did you take to overcome starting and continuing that?
I think it actually started a little before, because before I could get to actually sharing that type of content, I had to decide that I was going to tell the full truth, right? So that process, even though it was quick, it started before. Like one of the first things that I did was like create this Google sheet. And I was like, if you were going to tell the absolute truth about how you feel about each one of these pillars, or real stories that truly impacted you, what would you do? And I literally made a library of like all of these different topics. One of my best friends from college, who was working on my team at the time, helped me. We came up with like almost 200 ideas. And so many of them were stories, stuff that I had told her that I even forgot about, where she was like, oh, you could talk about this, you could do that. And so first I had to just sit with it. Like I had to look at, like, get it all out. Because when it's in your head, you're making up all these stories about, oh, well, no, I can't say that. Because if I say that, then people will think this. And then I'll have to give them more backstory and more backstory. So you have to talk yourself into it in the first place. And I had to just sit with that and pray with that for like a while. Like just look at it and be like, man, these stories impact other people. It's not just me. Like stories about my childhood could impact my mother. Right? It could impact my grandma's legacy. It could impact my husband, my bonus children, like all these other people. It's not just me. So I had to really sit with that first. And I kind of asked people permission, not from the standpoint of like, oh, can I say this? But more like, okay, this is what I'm feeling led to do. And I'm going to be brutally honest about a few pieces of these things. And I'm just letting you know now so people don't come to you and say, oh. And that was really good. It was good. It helped kind of lower some of the voices I had in my head about, oh my gosh, what will people feel about my family, or what will people think about whatever. And so that was one of those steps, like getting it all out so that it wasn't just swirling in my head and making me a little nutty. And then recognizing the impact that it might have on others to be so vulnerable, and then just letting them know up front, right? Getting their kind of permission, if you will, but then giving myself permission to go, you know what, if it's going to bless someone, it's not about you. You got to do it. Like, because there's people out there who think that you or any other influencer out there are living these hunky-dory, perfect lives, possibly had no challenges growing up or in their careers or this or that. And if folks only talk about the mountaintop, you disconnect from most, like 99% of people, because none of us have had perfect lives. So
yeah, I love that. So you created a Google sheet and you just data dumped all these stories and things into it. You got a friend to help you extract more stories and put stuff in there that you didn't even remember. And then you just sat on that for a while and then built up the courage, whether it's by getting permission or talking to people and telling them this is what you're going to do, and them saying that's fine, like this is what I think about it, maybe healing some relationships through the process. And yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, gave me a lot of courage to know that I wouldn't be making something worse by sharing my truth. Because I think that's a part of why we hide and we are not always as vulnerable, because most of our stories don't only impact us. So that was a big piece for me.
Thanks for sharing that. That's a good tip. I think that could be useful to a lot of people.
I hope so. It's freeing.
So typically before people give themselves permission for you to be more vulnerable, there's got to be a driving force that's going to push you over the edge, making it so you feel like you need to overcome that barrier and find those solutions. So diving into a little bit more about your why, but like, why do you think you had that drive? Like, what made you unstoppable for starting your podcast and being vulnerable? Like, what really pushed you just to do that?
You know what? As someone known as a personal finance expert, I just really got to the point where I was sick and tired of being sick and tired of having the same conversations that I just truly believed were more regurgitated personal finance advice that was not really moving the needle for people. Because I truly believe that a lot of what's out there is not rocket science, right? Like save 10% of what you bring in, or don't put all your eggs in one basket, or, don't invest in things you don't understand. Like so many people were saying the exact same thing. And while it's true, I really, truly believe, like Dave Ramsey says, personal finance success is 20% skill set and 80% mindset. And I just got so tired of being a part of the educators who focused on the 20%. I'm like, if I could just give myself permission to be one of the crazy folks out there harping on the 80% with no regard anymore for the 20%. But the thing is, my entire career was built on being the 20%. So that's how I made a living. So to say, I'm going to completely reject that. I literally took down my old site while I was building the new site. I had nothing out there. I had no programs I was selling. I had no products I was selling. I wasn't really talking about my old book anymore. Like I was just like, no, I got to go all in and not straddle the fence. And that was that was hard. It was hard because I got so tired of it that when I was getting called and getting booked to do stuff, if I tried to pitch going in another direction and they were like, no, we really want to stick to like holiday savings or something. I'm like, like, can we work in this piece of advice, or how can we find? And there were just so many people who surprisingly just wouldn't get it, couldn't get it. And so the driving force for the podcast was, again, just this idea like, man, I have the freedom to say whatever the heck I want and not be policed by producers. And I had no idea how agitated I have become or jaded by being in media so much and kind of being steered or directed towards these same conversations. Like I felt like a little indignation here and there where I'd be like, why do they want to do that again? But I was making so much money too that I was like, why rock the boat? Like, why would you rock the boat? And finally got to the point where, like I tell my audience, chase purpose, not money. My podcast and everything I do with Redefining Wealth, that was the central thing even in my own life. So I don't say it just as something cute. I say it knowing that this whole journey was birthed out of that, me chasing purpose, which my purpose had evolved. It's not going to be the same every season. Like you go through different seasons when it has to change and it has to evolve, and we have to give ourselves permission to let it evolve. And when I gave myself permission, it was to not be known as that personal finance expert anymore. It was to be this more of a thought leader who's helping people see the bigger picture. And really at the time, if there were a choice between staying on radio and doing television at the magnitude that I was doing it and having to keep betraying what I felt like was the truth, it's like someone else brought up the podcast to me, but it was the answer to a prayer because I wanted a way to be more confident speaking my full truth. I just had not thought about podcasting. So by the time I got to it, it was the perfect storm. Like it all came together and it was like, wow, this was what you needed. And I didn't even stay with the radio network who told me about podcasting. I was gone after 60 days.
Okay. So why was it so important to you to change your brand to this bigger picture? Like, what was it that made it so important to you to have that pivot?
Really, I think the frustration of it all. When I lost everything in the recession and I literally had gone from this 7-figure business to like scraping up change checking the couch cushions, shaking out old purses, looking for money. It was like a really bad time. And when my home foreclosed in Southern California, I ended up in this itty bitty apartment in Louisiana. And I was just so over it. Like, I was like, God, I need an answer. Like, why is this happening? I've been a good person. I treat people well. Like, I don't understand. And there was a scripture that I found. It's Proverbs 17:16. And it said, what good is money in the hands of a fool if they have no desire to seek wisdom? And it literally it shifted something for me immediately. That's actually how I got to the blog, right? Because I wanted to share these biblical principles about money. And when I was in that really, really low time, that really dark place, one of the things that I remember most is making a promise. I was like, man, if I get restored, I just want to share with people the truth. Like, I want to share the truth. Like, this journey is not about just chasing money, because so many of us have been groomed to do that. Like, even go to college and get good grades so you can get a job. This still plants the seeds of like, oh, money will fix it. Like, it's once you get money, you'll be fine and you can go off and live this good life. And on that bathroom floor, I was like, man, if I get restored, God, I just want to go everywhere I can and share with people that this journey is not about chasing money. It's about seeking wisdom. And in doing, that was my intention, right? That was my why that whole time from 2009 up until about 2017. That's what I honestly felt like I was doing. And my brand had grown, and it was the books and the TV and the radio and the speaking and all this stuff. But finally, there was that check in my spirit that was like, on the bathroom floor, you said you tell the truth. Like, I want to tell people the truth, but I had gotten comfortable telling the mainstream version of the truth. And it's so easy to walk that line with like truth and almost truth. And I was doing really well, and my heart was pure, and I had the best of intentions, but I knew that there was more that I was even doing personally than I was actually talking about publicly. And that thing that was like, no, that was burning inside, it was like, no, you have to be more comfortable with being all of you and sharing more so that people really get it. And so that was the thing, right? It was like, that place. Yeah.
So why is it so important for people to get it? Like, why is it so important that you share this authentic truth? You got complacent with the truth that you had, and then you evolved from there. And now you've got this, I'm going to call it the authentic truth.
Yeah.
But why is it so important that these people see it?
Because I don't want people to suffer the way that I did. And I really feel like if you know something, I feel like it's your responsibility to share, to teach it, and to not give bits and pieces, but to just go all out. And I realized and recognized that I have been sharing bits and pieces. And I feel like I'm trying to make up for lost time. I feel like, oh my gosh, how many more people could have already experienced some really life-shifting stuff if I would share more of what I truly consider to be the truth. I want to be in full integrity. And for me, I feel like to be in full integrity, you can't be selective, like, oh, I'll share, the fit pillar, but not money, whatever. I have these 6 pillars, right? It's like all of these things have helped me rebuild my life. Why would I choose to and give people Band-Aids when they need a transformation? And I know that all of these things contribute to said transformation. It's like a doctor could prescribe something and there's 3 medications you need, but he's like, I'm going to give you one and let's see what happens. Hope you get better. Like, why would you do that? If I need 3, I need 3. Like, give it all to me. And I see my work as, this may be over the top for some, I don't know, but I do see it as a matter of like life and death. Like, I feel like people are in such bondage to debt and to these ideas, these limiting beliefs around what it means to be wealthy and all this stuff. And I feel like, if not you, then who? Like, who's supposed to set the people free? There's tons of people out there that talk about money, but until you talk about it the way that I do, I don't care. You don't matter to me. Like, this is what I believe to be the truth. And now I just feel like, man, you got time. Like, you spent 8 years doing half truth. Like, go all out on what you feel is the full truth.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for letting me drill into you there. I think that we kept going deeper and deeper. And what I got out of it is that you don't want people to suffer the way you did. You went through all this hardship, and you don't want other people to have that. And from 2009 to 2017, your brand was giving these Band-Aids out, and now you're giving out these transformations,
Yeah.
long-standing solutions, because you're being more vulnerable, you're sharing at a deeper level and giving things at a bigger picture space.
Yeah.
And it makes sense why that's a pivotal time for your brand to shift and how things sort of exploded from that point, because it makes a bigger impact and a lasting impact on people's lives.
It really does. And it's so funny. When I gave up being on the radio show, people were like, what are you doing? Like, what do you mean millions of people listen to that show? And the only thing that kept coming up for me was people stumbled upon me. They came to laugh, right? It's a funny show, Steve Harvey morning show. So they came to laugh and have a good time. They didn't come to have deep conversation, right? So, but I would say people stumble upon me on that show. But I'm at a point in my life where I want to serve the people who were searching for something. And every time I see a review or I get a DM or an email from someone who says, I was praying for, like, I have been on the floor in tears, like basically describing my story almost in their own version and saying, I just need an answer. I need something. And a friend sent me your YouTube video, or I ran across like this thing on Instagram and you were being interviewed, or I did this or I did that. And I'm like, that's what it's for. And sometimes we think that it needs to be connected to these huge platforms. I feel that I've made so much more impact with the podcast in the last 2 years than I did in 4 years on a nationally syndicated radio show. And that is like mind blowing to me.
That is, especially since it's still a foundation, right? Like it's only going to keep going from where it's at.
Yeah. Yeah, we're a baby in this thing.
That's awesome. Really cool. So one thing I've noticed about having a really powerful why is that it allows you to power through really difficult situations. Were there any really difficult situations or self-made barriers that really were in your way that you've been up against in your journey? And do you mind sharing maybe an example and how you powered through it? Whether it could be something recent as well.
There's a couple things I would say from the last couple years in particular. One of them was recognizing my own limiting beliefs around what I could offer from this platform beyond just the podcast. So I came from like a brick and mortar business, so I was not into all the online stuff. And then I was slowly building up in the online stuff with the last brand, but I was much more focused on media and speaking, and then kind of ditching the media stuff to an extent just to focus really on the podcast. I really didn't know, like, so how am I supposed to like work? Where does the work come from now? Like, I know people used to find me through radio, so like I don't quite understand. And for the first year of the podcast, my only intention was to create consistent quality content. Like that was it. I was like, don't try to think about money. Don't try to think about anything else. Like just serve, and build your voice and get comfortable in this. I think
that's important. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was critical. And then the second year was like, okay, create community. And then, so I had this like list, right, when I was starting. And then the very last thing was like, okay, then figure out how to create income from it. Well, I had limiting beliefs around how to offer my actual services. And people were like, I can't believe you did. No, I really did. I was like, how do I take these concepts now? Because this is not the type of stuff I even talked about before. So before, I'm not a fitness expert, even though I talk about the importance of physical fitness as it relates to finance. I'm not a preacher, even though I talk about the faith pillar. Right. I'm not any of these things. So how do I even create something that supports people in stuff that I'm not an expert in, and I don't want to be just the money expert anymore? So how do I bring this all together? And I had a limiting belief around making offers, around sharing, around the holiday season. And like, I had all these stories going on about people won't buy, they won't get it, da, 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 da. And I had to do work around that. I really had to, like, I read a book, You're a Badass at Making Money by Jen Sincero. And she just talked about how we tell ourselves all these stories and essentially gets us out of alignment, right? Like it makes us disobedient. Like, you know, you're kind of feeling called to do more because now I've opened people up to this possibility of these pillars. but I don't have anything for them to like do. Right? It's like I can keep saying all this stuff, and then you kind of have people who are like, but how do I actually implement that in my daily life? Like, so how do we make this a thing? So for that one, I ended up finally surrendering. I kind of blurted it out on a podcast that I was thinking about doing a mastermind where I would take women for 12 months and help them bring these pillars to life. And the number of emails and DMs, I forgot it because I recorded it so much earlier. So by the time it came out, I didn't listen to it again. Like, it got edited and it was locked and loaded and ready to publish. I didn't listen to it again. It was just like a 30-second rant I went on in an episode. And then people started DMing me and going, where's the mastermind that you talked about today? And I was like, what mastermind? What are they even talking about? And like, after I saw it 2 or 3 times, I'm like, I better listen. And so that, like, it was a rant that again, another unintentional thing. Like, I just blurted it out in the midst of, and then it completely shifted the stories that I had in my head. And I think for a lot of us, we don't realize that the why is so much greater than just opening up people to possibility. Like, at some point, you may have to take people's hands and actually take them down the road. And in order to do that, you got to get out of the way and give yourself permission to know that if they came this far, they want more. It's not about us. Right. It's not about me and my hangups about who am I to teach that? Who am I to say that? But I was in it. I was in it. This was like last year. And so I've run 2 masterminds at this point. They've been freaking phenomenal.
Oh,
and
congrats.
And I did it because they started hounding me after I blurted it out. And I was like, okay, I got to do it. It was another one of those things, best thing I could have done. It wasn't even up like it was in my head, but I was like, who are you? So that was a big one for me, is understanding that it's not enough to just share sometimes. You have to show.
Yeah.
Like, it.
I mean, I liked how you broke it out. You did it by year, but as create a voice, then create community, and then find a way to create a source of income from that that's authentic.
Yeah. And so that was great. And another one for me has been allowing myself to get support. I don't think that I recognized how my why could impact other people. Like, sometimes you are the visionary with the big why, and other people's why is to support you in your why. And I don't think I truly had ever seen that to the magnitude that I have now since Redefining Wealth. In my previous brand, it was called Real Money Answers. I'd hire a couple people and we get the job done. And they liked me, they liked my work. But the people who are on my team now, who I've added over the last several months, in particular, last year or so, they are sold out for the vision. And I think one of the things that I've learned is that, like, your why is not just for you. Like, there are other people who want to use their gifts and talents to elevate a why that was not given to them.
Right.
And I didn't get that at first. I'm like, is this lady crazy? Like, is she? But yeah, your work has the ability to impact people to such a point that they are willing to support. And one of the reasons my social media handle is Seek Wisdom, one of the things I realized is that I was never really great at asking for help back in the day. Wasn't great at asking for help because I was usually the person that people came to for help. So it's like, who do you go to?
Right.
And understanding that this why is so much bigger than me has forced me to become more comfortable with saying, I don't know what I don't know. Or I have an idea, I'd like to do this, but I have no idea what happens behind the black curtain. Like, I see the end results, or I see the possible outcome, but I don't know lickety split about what it's going to take to bring it together, and allow people to help me in believing that they actually get it and they have my best interest at heart.
So the people that are helping you, are those people that came through your brand, or are there people that you hired and then they jumped on board after working with you?
Came through my brand. Several of the people that work on my team, they were podcast listeners. And there's a couple times where I got on Instagram on IG story and I was like, I really need support with a community person. Like, I have this vision to really serve my ladies in my communities, but I just don't have the time. Like, I know what I want for them. I know what we could do with intentional engagement and community building, but I personally can't do it. And it's also not something that I can make sense financially yet. So I think that possibly I need an intern or something. We have like 20 something applications. Not all the people worked out. We narrowed it down to maybe like 8 people. 4 or 5 on the interview. I was like, That's not gonna work. And then we got down to 3 interns, and then 1 survived after like 90 days, and I actually hired her on. And so
cool.
there's a couple people on the team, they were podcast listeners. So they got it. They felt the greater why just from going back to having that real connection, right? That's not something I could have had through radio ever. So it would have never dawned on me to even think that I could get support from my audience to keep growing it and finding more people like them. That wouldn't have come to me then because I didn't have that level of connection and authenticity.
That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So you've had some great success, especially the past 2 years with your podcast going. What's inspiring you most about your future as far as goals and dreams?
What's inspiring me most is just really knowing that this message transcends gender or race or religion or any of the things that I may have tried to box myself into originally. I say ladies all the time because my heart is for women. My heart has always been like, serve women. I've always been so surrounded by women, but I hear from more and more men.
Yeah, when I was looking up your YouTube videos, I saw several comments saying, starting with, I'm a guy, da.
Exactly. I get that all the time. You're right. Everyone starts with, I'm a guy, but your message has really resonated with me, or right? So I think what I look forward to most is just embracing the next level of understanding that the why transcends all those things. There's not a box to put it in. There's not a label or a category. A good message is a good message. It can support anyone who is ready to receive. We've been getting a lot of international folks. I have in my programs right now, women from the Netherlands and the UK and Singapore and Zambia and Kenya and Colombia and all this stuff. And it's like, wow, here I was because I was on national radio for years.
Right.
Thinking like, oh, I'm on national radio, so this is good, but there's greater. And I think the big thing for me now is just recognizing, accepting, and embracing the greater and allowing myself to be flexible. I have a vision for being able to really touch more lives internationally. I'm not attached to how I get there. I'm committed to this idea that redefining wealth should be reaching the masses, even greater than it is now. I think this is just the beginning, but I'm not attached to how I get there. So I'm really trying not to overthink and just allow myself to flow.
I like that.
Yeah, what feels good next? I think that right now we're in such an information overload, coaching type of space where it seems like everything requires a formula. And there's the launch formula for this, and there's a formula for that. And everything that I've done that's given me the greatest joy, honestly, it was so unexpected. And it wasn't something that I planned on January 1st in preparation for the year. Like, I've had some things that I've planned and they went well, yes. But the things that have given me the greatest joy, they kind of dropped in my spirit, and I was obedient and I just did it. And I didn't have a great formula, and I didn't have the perfect landing.
Sort of like the mastermind is something that you blurted out, and then now it's giving you this realization that you have these women from all these countries around the world, and sort of leveling you up, and it just happened.
I did it with an email. I put a video in an email. I had no landing page. I didn't have all the bells and whistles, yet they hurt my heart. And the right people were attracted to that, and they came, and it's been such a beautiful experience. And I'm really determined at this point, when I find myself slipping into super strategy, to just like chill and let myself be spirit led too. Like, not get so caught up in all of that. Not that you don't need strategy. I'm a planner to an extent, but I just also feel like you have to leave room for the call, like to let you be called in the direction you should go in.
Yeah, I had a guest, he made a comment saying that he was living in flow, and just because that's the state that he was in at the time we were talking. And I thought that was pretty amazing, because I've heard of people getting into flow, or certain hobbies, you can like get immersed in it for long enough to start being in a flow.
Yeah.
That was the first time that I heard that someone's living in flow. That's their day to day. So that was pretty eye opening for me.
I think that's what I'm aiming for, to live in flow day to day. I think sometimes we just know too much.
Right.
Like, we're just so aware of all the things that it distracts you from flow because you want to be logical. And I don't think flow is always logical. Flow is just like, freaking go with it.
Right.
But when you're like attached to your phone, attached to your calendar, attached to all these things, it's hard to be in flow and then so committed to all these rigid timelines and deadlines and things.
Yeah.
We require those things to run a business or to do what we're doing. But I definitely, like, I'm not trying to have 100% of my time and calendar dominated by, all the things I must do. No, I don't have to. You don't have to.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'd like to open up with some advice for the audience. If someone was looking to become an influencer, so they're not doing anything yet, what would be some of the biggest advice you'd give this person that's just starting out or thinking about starting out?
That's really good. Thinking about becoming an influencer. Number one, understand that the aim is not to be an influencer. The aim should be to really express your why in a way that just resonates and connects with people and hopefully makes a really positive impact on their lives. I don't believe that we necessarily should call ourselves influencers. I feel like if you are doing the work and it influences people, they will tell you. So focus on doing the work and creating great value for them. Another thing is, I think that so many people are consumed with this idea of becoming an influencer, possibly for the notoriety or the monetary gain, that they don't take time to master what it is they say they want to share with the masses. Some people, they take a life experience and they're like, I'm just going to go like teach other people because I had this life experience. It's like, but if you haven't worked out like a methodology of how, because everyone's not going to have the exact same results as you. So you have to study your craft. Like, you have to study like how to help people who may have different backgrounds or different symptoms, let's say, of something that you're trying to help them heal from potentially. Like, you have to do the work, and people think that the work are social media images. No, that's not going to be enough. Whatever it is that you're sharing, you really should have a great amount of hours invested in knowing what you say you know and living it to the extent that you can live it and being it. I think Redefining Wealth resonates so well with people because a lot of the stories and the examples that I share, some are from today, but many of them I can go in 2004, in 2008, in 2009. So I can show that this is what I've been doing and this is how I've been living. And this is why I truly believe that it can have this impact versus when I see people nowadays who are like, I'm an influencer now. Like yesterday they were doing something different, but today they're an influencer. It's like they had this experience last week and now they want to influence others. It's like, you may still be healing from some things, or you may still be working some things out, or you may have a few more tests that you need to kind of go through and process before you can guarantee results, if you will, right? So, I mean, sticking to that why, mastering whatever message it is you're saying you want to share with the masses, putting the time in, putting the hours in to research, to study, to read, to train, to get coaching yourself, like, because if that why is great, people will trust you. Like, they're trusting you, they're investing. If your platform is speaking or books or podcast or if they put time into listening, right, Jeremy, they trust you now. So you don't want to just be putting crap out there. And if you're not studying and mastering your craft, you're going to sound the exact same. Like, you'll have the same 2 or 3 points over and over again that you're trying to say in 19 different ways. You don't have any experience to add to it. So be careful of that. I didn't aim to be an influencer. I just want to create impact.
I like that. That's really good advice.
I hope so. I hope they follow it.
So you've been able to grow a successful podcast and you've got quite a good following on other social platforms as well. What's been your secret sauce? Like, if someone is already influencing and they're doing their thing on their platform, what's some advice that you can give to someone that's established that you feel like you're doing differently that can help level them up?
I would say one thing is engagement. I talk back to the audience and I think they feel the care. I see a lot of people who are influencers, they may get 30 comments, 50 comments or something, and they don't reply, they don't like, they don't engage. And I think that people feel how much you actually care. If your brand is based on authenticity or really community and that type of stuff, then that should show in the way that you engage. So that's something. YouTube, I'm not as good because I'm not a YouTuber. I'm not a person who naturally like goes to YouTube or even LinkedIn or anything. So I always tell people my favorite platform is Instagram. And if you want to interact with me, it's probably the best place to find me. But on Instagram, for sure, like I read the comments, I go through, I answer people, or I just drop some emojis so they know that they were seen and heard, and there's that connection there. Also in DMs, I check my own DMs. I reply to people as much as I possibly can, or share their stuff on my stories or whatever. So that engagement is really key. I think I do that well. And then I think again, kind of spirit-led. I don't have some exact formula. I just kind of like if a quote or an idea or a thought drops in my spirit, even when I don't feel like it, even when it's inconvenient, I just do it. And one of the things that's worked really well on my Instagram is that I don't drive a lot because I work from home. And even when I do drive, it's like within a 1.5-2 mile radius. I don't really go anywhere. So sometimes when I'm driving into the city and I have like a 30-minute drive or something, I usually have on like music that makes me think, stuff that makes me think, or I'm really using it as reflection time. And I always get like a little nugget. And so I used to be like, oh, I have to wait until I get home and get in my light and get my laptop and so by 3 hours later, I'm not inspired. So I never do it. And that was all good content that went to the wayside because I forgot by the time I got back home or something. And I started to just allow myself freaking sit in the car and do it. Like with your seatbelt on, just sit there with your phone. That's what it's for. No one needs your perfection. Just be obedient and freaking deliver the message. And people really responded well to me just sitting in my car and with my having whatever that 2, 3, 5 minute conversation was. And so I would say that's the thing, is not getting consumed with perfection. Because we think that, oh, everyone has these beautiful images and everything's so polished and they look so professional. And so the trick is, if you've had this polished professional profile going, you don't want to disrupt it with something that's kind of sweaty at the gym, hair natted, baseball cap on. You're like, oh, but my images are so pretty. Like, so I don't want to do that. But that's the thing that goes back to showing that real side and that human side. And so
I think that's
work.
I think that's great advice, because there's been times where something comes to mind and I've shared it on the spot, and you get a lot more engagement because it's something that's more raw and authentic in the moment, as opposed to, like you said, 3 hours later, you lose motivation or you don't word it the right way or you forget about it. So I think.
And you're all perfect now. You have your lighting. As a woman, it's like, oh no, maybe I should go put lip gloss on, or I should like clean up my eyebrows first, or I should. And it's like, no one cares about that. Like, if you have a message that you truly believe is going to help at least an audience of one, just freaking record and publish and stop worrying about whether it's in alignment with your pretty and perfect images. Because you're not pretty and perfect all the time. We're awesome and a hot ass mess at any given time. At any given time. I could be either one. So
awesome. Well, I appreciate you sharing your why. Before I open the floor for you to pitch your stuff, you know our audience, and it's people that are looking to start influencing and maybe level up or get more comfortable sharing their voice. So is there any other last words or pieces of advice that come to mind that you'd like to share?
I would say trust the process. That would be my last piece of advice. Just trust the process and trust that your process is your process. And no matter how any of our influencer journeys unfold, you shouldn't expect for it to look like mine, and mine shouldn't look like Jeremy's, and yours shouldn't look like the next person. Like, we all have the individual and unique stories that we have to create the impact and influence that we were meant to make. And so if you start comparing or judging against, oh, so-and-so is in my niche, and look at what they're doing, and look at their numbers, and look at their comments, and look at their engagements, the more you look over there, your eyes and your focus are not on what is authentically calling you. And if the call is real, it will start to unfold. It doesn't happen for everyone overnight. It doesn't happen for everyone within weeks. It doesn't happen within months. For some of us, it can take longer than that to truly get to where we want to be. But if it's genuine to you, if the why is great enough, is it really about the numbers? Is it about the number of comments? Or is it about the fulfillment of knowing that you're using your voice in the way that you were intended to? So just trust your process.
Awesome. Well, I'd like to end the podcast episode giving you the opportunity to talk about your brands, your social accounts, your podcast, your mastermind, anything else you'd like to share.
Sure.
Thanks.
Well, first of all, you can find all things Patrice Washington at patricewashington.com. As I shared, if you just want to say, hey, I heard you on Why Influence, you can hit me up on Instagram, my favorite place to play. So that's Seek Wisdom, PCW. And in terms of like my mastermind and my programs, one that I think would be helpful if you are looking to really build your brand and build your voice. One program that I do, it's a group coaching program, is called Purpose to Platform. And it's really about showing would-be influencers, if you will, people who are looking to build their voice in this space. One, just the right mindset to cultivate before you even get into it, because it's not an easy journey for all of us to navigate. I go through defining your messaging, creating your proprietary method, some marketing stuff, money stuff, of course, like all the things that I wish I would have had someone maybe help me out with a little sooner. So it's all the lessons I've learned through coaching and training and just building this brand for the last 10 years, and do it in a group coaching format with a really amazing community. It's mostly women, yes, from all over the world, but they're super supportive. And it's just incredible. So if that's something you're interested in too, you can find it at patricewashington.com. But other than that, like if I can be a resource or just a source of inspiration, just connect with me on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, you heard her. Connect with her on Instagram, and I'll put all the links to her website, the program, social accounts on the show notes for the website, on the Why Influence website, so you can find it all there. Patrice, thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing your journey. I hope you have a great remainder of 2019. And I look forward to seeing your influence keep on growing.
Thank you so much. And thank you for what you're doing, what you're putting out into the world. This is good stuff.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate it. Before I let you go, I like to ask, because I'm still learning, getting comfortable with this whole process. Yeah, do you have any advice for me as being a podcast host? Or any moments where maybe I caught you off guard, or anything you think I could be doing better, or any compliments about anything?
Yeah. No, I do like how prepared you were with your questions. I would say don't be so committed to the question. Just allow yourself to flow in the conversation. Because I feel like sometimes we have pauses and you were like checking back in with your questions. And I think you just got to trust yourself. You know what the audience needs because you're their guide. Just let yourself have more fun.
Awesome.
How long have you been podcasting?
This is my 25th interview with you.
Oh, nice. Nice. Yeah, you made it. You made it past 10. That's a big one.
Yeah, my goal starting out was like 30. I don't care what's going on. I just want to hit 30. And I've been doing, 30 interviews, because I'm at like 27 episodes, because I've done like a episode 0. And then after every 10 episodes, I've done like a update episode. Because like for me, like I started a podcast because I'm comfortable on camera starting out. Like I had no personal Instagram, I didn't post on Facebook for over a year. Like I'm off social media. I've got a business that I've grown over 200,000 social followers for, but I'm just behind the scenes the whole time. So anytime I was in anything, I would just edit my face out or put something over me. So like I've got experience growing a social following for the business. Just recently, I put myself on my business's YouTube for the first time. It's a car dealership. I import classic Japanese cars. So I was reviewing a few cars. So I've got like now a couple videos that hit like 1,000 views with my face on it. And to me, that's like, I spoke at, first time I spoke in public or on a stage was at Podcast Movement. I did the Ignite.
Really?
And I was super nervous. The video is horrible because I'm so nervous. And I tried memorizing. I'm still learning my speaking style.
Yeah.
But I still did it.
What created this desire to kind of push yourself out of your comfort zone?
Well, my wife, she does keynotes. She's a public speaker, author, that kind of thing. And so when we first started dating, I didn't really talk that much, well, just in general, my whole life. And she gave me a check for Toastmasters as one of our like first gifts. And it took me over 4 years to cash that check. I kept the check until I was willing to use it to join Toastmasters. Yeah. And then I joined it, did Toastmasters for like 2 years, just getting used to like talking more. And at the same time, I joined mastermind groups and like I've built a business, I've sold a business, I have another business. I've got entrepreneur experience.
Yeah.
So I've helped a lot of people. So like I started seeing my voice mattered. I started getting a little more comfortable with speaking and articulating. So then I was like, the next step was like, let's self-improvement and also try to help others, because I feel like I've got a lot of wisdom that's like inside me that other people don't have access to because I don't share. And there's a lot of other people out there like me who aren't sharing because of whatever reason they have. And if I can help inspire those people or enable those people to start sharing, then that's going to help raise the collective consciousness level of the human race, is sort of how I word it.
That is so amazing. Like I have like that warm and fuzzy feeling like I'm your like big sister or something. I'm like, oh, I'm just so happy for you. That's incredible. So now that you're at 25 and the goal was 30, do you see yourself going beyond?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so recently I've done a lot of reflection on like purpose and stuff like that, especially lately. And like my car dealership's not as fulfilling as it used to be. Like I used to give cars people didn't have access to. So everyone, like I've got testimonials from people just happy out the wazoo, like super happy, making their dreams come true. But now they can get cars from other people because there's more people entering the marketplace. So I'm in the process of liquidating that business now, which will take about 6 months or so to like run through that process. And it's been for sale, but it's not really sellable the way it sits. So then I want to level up what I'm doing with the podcast, slowly get more comfortable doing video. I mean, I put myself out there in my car dealership now on video. So why not put myself on video on the podcast? Like I've done a couple like these kind of videos out there, but nothing that's like a specific to like YouTube type video. And actually have a friend a while ago who gave me his personal brand. His name was Jeremy too. So like he has a YouTube channel, Instagram, like all these things that he gave me that I can rebrand and then put myself in that.
Oh,
and
wow.
And like I tried, this was like 2 years ago when this happened, I tried it and just like super uncomfortable, just jumping 2 feet into it. So I sort of took myself off of it. And so I'm working my way up to like bringing that in. So incorporating that, whether I like replace the YouTube that I have and rebrand it with Y Influence, or start a personal one that's separate and have the one I have as just like a dump for the podcast episodes. I haven't really figured out the whole ecosystem for it yet, but
Yeah.
it's an older YouTube channel, so it's got like 100,000 subscribers, but like it's older, so like who knows how many are still sticking around. And but like as you post more and are consistent, it can relaunch a little bit. The Instagram has like 15,000, and it's like an established little brand I can throw myself into to start out. And I'm just, I guess, building up confidence to try to get myself into that, I guess.
Yeah, that's a blessing.
Yeah.
And take advantage of it. And I think you're right. Like, I mean, to kind of just jump all in and not, it's like, whoa, wait, you know, you don't want to overwhelm yourself and then not do anything, but to kind of revisit it now that you start building up the podcast. And have you thought about using that Jeremy Instagram page, like starting to drop podcast episodes, or just doing something that's like an intro to that on that page that's like, oh, look at what we've been up to type of thing, to start to get engagement back going?
Yeah, I've thought about it. I haven't done it yet. The podcast definitely has helped with me figure out my why, because I'm good at entrepreneurship. I understand small business and starting startups and stuff like that. But like what the knowledge I'm sharing isn't that. It's my personal journey of trying to not caring to not share and being intentionally behind the scenes and just not caring, which blows my wife's mind. She's like, I don't understand how you didn't care to not have a voice. And like she's drilling me into this stuff. But like I see more purpose, especially after the honeymoon. Like I went to in Africa, I talked to a bushman who lives in the bush. Like we got really deep in this conversation for over an hour. He's just talking about every animal and how you can counter each animal and how he's so comfortable just being out in the bush by himself at night. And he's like talking about how to approach hippos and lions and elephants and buffalo and snakes and crocodiles, like each animal one at a time, like how you're supposed to handle the situations with them. And it made me think, like, this guy has so much wisdom, and all that wisdom's going away because people are generally moving to cities and there's going to be less bushmen now. Like when I went to India, I went to a house made out of wood and poop put together, but inside the house there was a charging cable for a cell phone. And so these people now have cell phones. And like I was in a marketplace, and there were these two kids just running their parents' booth, and I was waiting on someone else, so I had time to kill, and I bought like a 20-cent necklace from them. Like they don't make any money. They're in the slums. But when I leaned over to see what they were doing on their phone, these two kids were playing online on the same team, a first-person shooter game, like Call of Duty style. And it's like, this kid has a nicer phone than I have. And So like we were talking about how culture, if we could say it's like endangered species, it'd be like on the extreme list because of all this technology it's hitting. And I think that on top of giving just everyone a voice to share their wisdom, I think that that can also go into culture. And there's people that maybe aren't sharing their culture that should be sharing it because that's getting erased. So if anything, I feel more purpose after the honeymoon and feel more aligned with my podcast the further that I've been sticking with it, I guess is what I'm saying.
Oh, that's incredible. I don't know if you know this. I'm first generation American as well. My family's Belizean. And I completely identify with that because like my daughter knows nothing about Belizean culture. Like even when we try, I mean, she knows some food stuff, but in terms of just practices and ways of being, it has been so kind of just washed away for all of them. I mean, I look at my nieces and nephews and everybody who's pretty much been here. And even my cousins who were born in Belize that are here now in the States, like their kids, like definitely. And they still kind of have accents and stuff, but still there's nothing outside of like a few dishes, not religion wise, just kind of like spiritual practices, not how there were so many different things that my mom would do with my daughter when she was born. And my mother-in-law, they're American, and my mother-in-law would be like, what is she doing to the baby? You know, like, what is that? But there are all these things that in our culture we would just do. And before my grandma, like when my grandma passed in 2013, it took me like a year to really digest the fact that my cousins and I don't know anything. Like my grandma kept anything that we knew really about Belizean culture up, and we took it for granted.
Right.
And I wish I had video
exactly
or something of her saying, this is what we do when, and here's why. And to this day, like I don't take medicine. Like I'm not like a pain pill popper type. Like I just don't take anything. And I never did, because all the way up until my grandma passed, if something was wrong, she would create a herbal concoction, or she would call her friends and they like bring some stuff from the bush from like Belize and she would boil it and make it. And like, I don't know what it is. I took it for granted that she could do it. And I took some medication the other day and I went out my mind. And it dawned on me, my husband was like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, I don't know. I feel so bad and I'm so happy. Like I was just losing it, like literally just 2 days of it. And my mom was like, well, you don't take anything. You've been raised on herbs. Like, why did you wait until you're almost 40 to start like taking Western medication? And I was like, I don't know. They prescribed it. And I don't know. And so you talk about losing the culture and not having a voice. Like, I'm like, man, like my mom is now the matriarch of our family, and she's so Americanized that she's not
right.
she's not helpful anymore. You're like,
and even in these other countries, like I mean, I went to some extreme out of the norm places, and I mean, in Africa, they're talking about how the kids these days, all they want is the fancy cars and do rock music and da-da-da-da-da. It's like they're eating up the Western culture. So even within the same country that's been untouched is now like that bottom generation is going to be raised with them, with that culture. And then all that's going away over time. So the speed at which culture is dying is tremendous.
That's really unfortunate, right?
It is.
You think about where we'll be 25, 50 years from now, that the whole world will look alike. What will be the point in traveling? Like, what will be the point in going to another country if the culture is going to be so vanilla, like so exactly the same as your own, just maybe with a different accent? Like, that's not exciting. But what will be the point?
Yeah, it's hard to know. But
yeah. Wow. Well, so proud of you.
Thank you
for connecting in podcast movement, and for connecting and for keeping your word and reaching out and making this happen. I love what you're doing. I'm excited to see you in a year.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on and telling me how I can connect with you and then spending this much time just chatting, especially after. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, that concludes the interview. I think you would agree with me that Patrice is a perfect guest for this podcast. She's doing something she's extremely passionate about. She's gone through a couple iterations of that. She's overcome barriers to get to that point. She's making a real difference, and she's being her authentic self. And that's all the perfect attributes for a good guest on the Why Influence podcast. So I'm glad that we were able to get her on the show and extract a lot of stories and tips out of her. One of my favorite nuggets from the conversation was when Patrice shared her story of creating a Google Sheet and sitting down with her friend and coming up with over 200 stories where she was very vulnerable so that she can then tap into those stories and use that for sharing. I thought it was a really good exercise for exploring yourself, whether you're trying to use it as a tool to share those stories or not. I think it's good to self-explore, and then she was able to make better relationships with people in her community as a result of it, because then she could go address those with each person and say, hey, I'm thinking about sharing this story. I'm addressing this situation. I just want you to be aware. And it really makes these deeper connections with her family and friends that are part of those stories that she extracted. So I really like that one. That's a good exercise to take note of if you're thinking about strategies for getting more comfortable with sharing. As we dove deep into Patrice's why, we sort of discovered that she doesn't want people to suffer the way she did. And because she can help people, she feels like it's her responsibility to share that knowledge and wisdom so other people don't have that suffering, or maybe they can shortcut how long they have that suffering for or avoid it altogether. But it's clear that Patrice has an impact-oriented why, which is perfect for the podcast because those are the type of people we're looking to interview. Now, in reality, Patrice hasn't been podcasting very long. I mean, she's got a blog, she's been on radio, she wrote a book, and she had her old brand where she did public speaking and then pivoted from there. So she came with some platform, but she hasn't really been podcasting for that long. I really liked her approach where she spent the first year creating a voice, and then she spent her second year creating community. And then now it's her third year. She's trying to figure out how to create money as a result of this so she can have a lifestyle with her influence. Now, Patrice shared a ton of tips with us, and I'll just reiterate a couple points. Patrice emphasized that you should not become an influencer to become an influencer or become an influencer to make money. You should become an influencer as a result of trying to make an impact, and the influencer part comes as a byproduct. And if you're intentionally trying to make an impact, influence will come because you'll just end up influencing at least one person, and then you made an impact. You need a really powerful why that's going to drive you through uncomfortable situations, and that why should really be impact oriented. Patrice really emphasized that point as well. Now, we've heard this one before, but it doesn't hurt to hear it again, which is engagement. You should talk back to your audience. You should reply to every comment. You should reply to every DM. You should do all of these things until it becomes such a burden that you can't keep up with it. So many influencers, especially in their early days and just starting out, are just leaving things on the table. There might be a new YouTuber and they've got 3 comments on a video and they don't even address or comment or do anything with those comments. And those are 3 people that now maybe they lose as a result of not having that engagement. So it's important, especially in the early days, but even long term, to engage as much as you possibly can with your audience. She shared another common suggestion, which doesn't hurt to hear again, which is don't get consumed with perfection. You don't need to be perfect. Just start getting stuff out there. She said if you have a message that can impact one, do it. And she said that you should just trust the process, trust your process, because no matter what other people are doing, you shouldn't really compare to other people. You can get ideas and then incorporate those, but you shouldn't be comparing yourself to anyone else, and you should just trust your own process, figure out what you want to do, what works for you, and then just execute on that and just have faith in the fact that that process will work for you. Anyway, I think you would agree that Patrice shared a ton of value with us in this episode, and there's just so much value to be had. I hope we can bring her on again as her journey evolves. I would love to have her on the show again sometime in the future. After the interview was over and we stopped recording, Patrice started asking me questions about the podcast, my journey to starting the podcast, and my reasons for continuing the podcast. It was really cool how interested she was in asking those questions and hearing the answers. By the end of it, she was even saying that she felt proud of me as if she was like a bigger sister looking at a younger brother. She just felt really proud to the fact that I've made it this far and that I'm driving forward, and she thinks it's really important. And then after the interview, I sent her a private message on Instagram. I like to use the platform of choice for communication with guests, and Patrice made it clear that she liked Instagram. So I sent her a private message on Instagram and just said that I really enjoyed her having a conversation with her on the podcast, and I think what she's doing really important, and a message sort of like that. And she replied saying that she really enjoyed the conversation too. And then I quote, "I'm so glad you're using your voice to make a difference and encouraging others to do the same. We need you. And I thought that was an awesome message. She's really encouraging, and I really like that about her. Now, how did I do with the interview? Well, I feel like I did a pretty good job overall. I feel like I stumbled a few times. I sort of blame the fact that I haven't done an interview in a while. I just got back from traveling for over a month on my honeymoon through India and Africa, so I'm a little rusty. So I sort of attribute it to that. I feel like I tried reading a question, but then I was also trying to half not read the question, so then it just made me stumble a little bit as I was trying to ask a question. Did that maybe twice during the interview. So I feel like I could have handled those moments better. And Patrice gave me feedback on this, pretty much just saying that I should just trust what I'm going to ask and trust where the conversation is going to go and not depend on the questions so much. And then another thing that I still struggle with is sharing more of myself during an interview. I do a pretty good job before and after an interview sharing myself, but during the interview, I'm mostly focused on the guest, which I think is important, but I also have value to share, and I'm especially going through this journey myself. So I think it's good to be sharing more of myself, and that's something I'm still working on. Now, if you're still listening, I think you should give yourself a pat on the back because this is a self-development related podcast, and you deserve to give yourself a pat on the back for making it through a long episode of the podcast. If you want to learn more about Patrice Washington or see the show notes for the episode or get links to all of her websites and social medias, then take a moment to go to whyinfluence.com, episode 25. So that's whyinfluence.com, and then navigate to podcasts, and you can go to episode 25, and you'll get everything you need in there. Again, our mission here at the Why Influence podcast is to inspire the sharing of hidden knowledge and wisdom. So if anyone in your network is holding this hidden knowledge or hidden wisdom, consider sharing the podcast with them and encouraging them to start sharing. If you had any profound moments as a result of this podcast, please submit them. I'd love to hear how this podcast has influenced you. And if you'd like to join the Why Influence community, where we support each other in overcoming self-made barriers and growing more influence, then I suggest you go to whydiscord.com, whydiscord.com, and that's where the Why Influence community sits. Thank you again for taking the time to listen to the podcast in its entirety. Patrice, thanks so much for coming on the show. I look forward to bringing you on again in the future. And again, if you can share this podcast with your community, that would be amazing. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.